The training facility hummed with an eerie blue glow, its crystalline walls pulsing like a heartbeat. Commander Zara Chen stepped into the combat arena, her boots echoing against the polished obsidian floor. Every muscle in her body was coiled tight, ready to unleash hell on whatever alien monstrosity they'd throw at her this time. "Welcome, human specimen," came a voice that sounded like gravel being crushed under steel wheels. Zara's eyes snapped to the observation deck, where a creature that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a nightmare stood, watching her. Its 4 arms gestured dismissively as it continued. "I am Instructor Vex'thul. Today we shall conduct a simple sparring exercise to evaluate your species' combat capabilities." Zara let out a bitter laugh that bounced off the arena walls. "Sparring exercise? That's rich coming from the species that wiped out half of Earth's military in their first greeting party." Her voice dripped with venom as she rolled her shoulders, loosening up for what she knew would be anything but simple. The alien instructor's mandibles clicked together in what might have been amusement. "Your emotion responses are quite fascinating. However, I assure you this is merely a control assessment. We have no intention of causing permanent damage to our valuable research subject." "Research subject?" Zara's eyes blazed with fury. "Listen here, bug boy. The last time you freaks said something was controlled, my entire squad ended up as decorations on your ship's hull. So forgive me if I don't trust your definition of harmless." A mechanical whirring filled the air as the arena's floor began to shift and change. Platforms rose from hidden compartments, creating a complex 3-dimensional battlefield complete with obstacles, cover points, and what looked suspiciously like weapon dispensers embedded in the walls. "Your opponent will be one of our junior combat specialists," Vex'thul announced, his voice carrying that same condescending tone that made Zara want to rip his head off. "Kril'zon is considered quite skilled among our youth. This should provide adequate data on human resilience and tactical thinking." The far end of the arena opened with a hiss, and out stepped something that made Zara's blood run cold. Kril'zon stood nearly 8 feet tall, its chitinous exoskeleton gleaming like black armor. For arms ended in razor-sharp claws, and its elongated head housed compound eyes that seemed to track her every microscopic movement. But what really got Zara's attention were the scars crisscrossing its carapace. This wasn't some fresh-faced recruit. This thing was a killer. "Junior specialist my ass," Zara muttered under her breath, automatically falling into a combat stance. Her mind raced through every dirty trick, every underhanded tactic, every survival technique she'd learned during her years fighting these bastards in the outer colonies. Vex'thul's voice boomed across the arena again. "The exercise will commence in 30 seconds. Remember, this is for scientific purposes only. Try not to disappoint us with typical human fragility." Zara's lips curved into a savage grin. "Oh, I'll give you some data, all right. Hope you're taking detailed notes, because class is about to be in session." The countdown began, and Zara used every precious second to analyze her surroundings. The weapon dispensers were too far away to reach before Kril'zon could intercept her. The platforms offered decent cover, but also created blind spots where that thing could ambush her. Her only advantages were her smaller size, greater agility, and the fact that these arrogant aliens had no idea what humans were truly capable when their backs were against the wall. 10 seconds. Vex'thul announced with obvious satisfaction. "Begin mental preparation for combat assessment." Zara closed her eyes for just a moment, letting the rage and pain of everyone she'd lost fuel her determination. When she opened them again, they burned with an intensity that would have made seasoned warriors step back. But these aliens were about to learn that humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to survive. And there was a universe of difference between the two. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, begin. The moment the word left Vex'thul's lips, both combatants exploded into motion. But where Kril'zon moved with the calculated precision of a trained warrior, Zara moved with the desperate fury of someone who had nothing left to lose. Kril'zon lunged forward with 2 of its claws extended, clearly expecting to end this quickly with a simple intimidation display, followed by a controlled takedown. It had probably done the same routine hundreds of times with other species, following some predetermined script designed to gather data while minimizing actual violence. Zara had other plans. Instead of backing away or attempting to block as expected, She dropped into a slide that took her directly between the alien's legs. As she passed underneath, she grabbed a handful of loose gravel from the arena floor and flung it upward into Kril'zon's compound eyes. The alien let out a shriek of surprise and momentary blindness, stumbling forward as its visual sensors were overwhelmed. Zara rolled to her feet behind it and immediately launched herself onto its back, wrapping her arms around its throat in a chokehold that would have killed a human in seconds. But Kril'zon wasn't human, and its anatomy was different enough that the choke was more annoying than life-threatening. Still, it gave Zara the few seconds she needed to locate what she was really after. Every species had weak points, and during her years of fighting these things, she'd learned to identify them quickly. What is she doing? Vex'thul's voice carried a note of confusion. This appears to be far more aggressive than typical sparring behavior. Zara found what she was looking for. A small gap in the exoskeleton where the head met the neck, probably an evolutionary leftover from when these creatures were smaller. Without hesitation, she jammed her thumb into the opening and pressed hard against what felt like a nerve cluster. Kril'zon's entire body convulsed, and it reached back with all four arms to try to dislodge her. But Zara was already moving again, using the alien's own momentum to swing around to its front. As she came face to face with those compound eyes, she smiled with genuine malice. "Surprise, you oversized cockroach. School's in session." She drove her knee upward into what passed for a Kril'zon solar plexus, then used her grip on its throat to pull herself higher and deliver a devastating elbow strike to the side of its head. The impact sent vibrations through the alien skull that clearly weren't expected or comfortable. "Stop. This is not proper sparring protocol." Vex'thul's voice had lost its condescending tone and taken on something approaching panic. Kril'zon implement defensive pattern 7. But Kril'zon was learning the hard way that humans didn't follow patterns. Zara had already anticipated its next move and was flowing into her counter before the alien even began its defensive sequence. She grabbed one of its arms and used a joint lock that worked surprisingly well on alien anatomy, forcing Kril'zon to bend awkwardly or risk having its limb snapped. "You want data?" Zara snarled as she increased the pressure on the joint lock. "Here's some data for you. Humans don't spar. We survive. And when we survive, we make sure the things trying to kill us don't get a second chance." Kril'zon managed to break free by sacrificing some mobility in its captured arm, then backed away to reassess this human that was clearly not behaving according to its expectations. Its compound eyes focused on Zara with what might have been newfound respect mixed with confusion. "Fascinating," Vex'thul murmured, though his voice carried undertones of concern. "The human appears to be treating this as actual combat rather than a training exercise. Perhaps we should terminate the session." "Like hell you will." Zara shouted up at the observation deck. "You wanted to see what humans can do? Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because the show's just getting started." She feinted left, then dove right toward one of the weapon dispensers. Kril'zon moved to intercept her, but Zara's years of street fighting and military training had taught her to read opponents quickly. The alien was still thinking in terms of sparring, trying to control and subdue rather than destroy. That hesitation was going to cost it dearly. Zara reached the dispenser and slammed her fist against the activation panel. A variety of weapons materialized, but she ignored the obvious choices like energy rifles and plasma cannons. Instead, she grabbed what looked like a simple metal rod, about 2 feet long and perfectly balanced. Kril'zon paused, clearly confused by her choice. In its mind, the human had just armed herself with the least threatening weapon available. It had no way of knowing that Zara had spent years learning to turn anything into a deadly weapon, and that the simplest tools were often the most effective in the right hands. "You know what your biggest mistake was?" Zara asked casually as she began to circle Kril'zon, the metal rod spinning lazily in her hands. "You assumed I was here to play games. But see where I come from. When something tries to kill you, you kill it back. Harder." The alien instructor's voice crackled through the arena speakers. "Kril'zon implement maximum defensive protocols immediately. This human is exhibiting behavior patterns far outside normal parameters." But it was too late for protocols and patterns. Zara had spent the last few minutes learning everything she needed to know about her opponent's capabilities, reflexes, and most importantly, its limitations. Now it was time to put that education to use. She launched into an attack sequence that would have looked like pure chaos to most observers, but every movement was calculated for maximum effect. The metal rod became an extension of her will, striking nerve clusters, joint connections, and sensory organs with surgical precision. Kril'zon tried to mount a defense, but its training hadn't prepared it for an opponent who fought like their life depended on it. Because for Zara it did. Every human who had died at the hands of these aliens was watching through her actions. Every friend she'd lost, every colony that had been wiped out, every child who would never grow up because of these creatures, they all demanded justice. And Zara was more than happy to deliver it. The fight that followed was less a sparring match and more a masterclass in human brutality. Zara moved like death itself, striking from impossible angles and using the arena's obstacles not as cover, but as weapons in their own right. She bounced off walls to change direction mid-attack, used the raised platforms to gain leverage for devastating strikes, and turned every piece of the environment into part of her offensive arsenal. Kril'zon, for its part, fought valiantly, but it was fighting a textbook battle against an opponent who had thrown the textbook out the window and was now using the paper to start fires. Enough! Vex'thul's voice boomed through the arena. Terminate the exercise immediately. Security protocols are now in effect. But Zara wasn't listening to alien commands anymore. She was too busy demonstrating exactly why humanity had earned such a fearsome reputation among the civilized species of the galaxy. They didn't fight for glory or honor or tactical advantage. They fought to live. And that made all the difference in the universe. As Kril'zon stumbled backward, its exoskeleton cracked and its confidence shattered, Zara paused in her assault, not out of mercy, but because she wanted to see the fear in those compound eyes. She wanted this creature to understand what it felt like to be outmatched, outgunned, and completely at someone else's mercy. Still think this is just sparring? She asked with a smile that would have made sharks nervous. The answer came in the form of emergency alarms and the sound of heavy blast doors slamming shut around the arena. But Zara wasn't worried. In fact, she was just getting warmed up. After all, they wanted data on human combat capabilities, and she still had plenty left to show them. Part 2, The Reckoning. The emergency lockdown protocols kicked in with a symphony of mechanical grinding and electronic warnings. Red lights bathed the arena in an ominous glow as blast shields descended from the ceiling, sealing every exit. But Commander Zara Chen barely noticed. Her attention was focused entirely on the trembling alien before her. Kril'zon backed against the arena wall, its compound eyes darting frantically between Zara and the sealed exits. Purple fluid, probably the alien equivalent of blood, seeped from cracks in its exoskeleton. Its 4 arms hung at awkward angles, and its breathing came in ragged gasps that sounded like steam escaping from a broken pipe. Emergency containment activated. Vex'thul's voice crackled through the intercom system, though it had lost all of its earlier smugness. Human subject, cease all hostile actions immediately. You are in violation of 17 different galactic combat regulations. Zara let out a laugh that echoed off the sealed walls like breaking glass. Galactic combat regulations? That's hilarious coming from the species that carpet bombed civilian colonies just to make a point. She began walking slowly toward Kril'zon, the metal rod still spinning in her grip. Tell me, Instructor, did your regulations cover the genocide of the farming settlements on Kepler 442? Because I was there. I saw what your people did to the children. The alien pressed itself flatter against the wall, a defensive posture that would have been pathetic if it weren't so satisfying. Zara could see her reflection in its compound eyes, and she liked what she saw. For the first time in months, she looked like the predator instead of the prey. The human appears to be experiencing severe psychological distress, Vex'thul muttered to someone else on the observation deck. Recommend immediate sedation protocols before the situation escalates further. Escalates. Zara's voice rose to a shout that made even Kril'zon flinch. You abduct me from a prisoner transport, drag me halfway across the galaxy to your little laboratory, and then act surprised when I don't play nice with your pet monster? The situation escalated the moment you decided to treat human beings like lab rats. She raised a metal rod, and Kril'zon let out a sound that was equal parts whimper and hiss. But instead of delivering the killing blow, Zara paused. Something in the alien's posture had changed. The compound eyes that had been tracking her every movement now seemed to be looking past her, towards something else in the arena. "Wait," Zara said slowly, lowering the rod but not relaxing her guard. "You're not scared of me anymore. What changed?" Her question was answered by a low humming sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The arena's floor began to shift again, but this time instead of creating obstacles, it was opening new passages. And from those passages came sounds that made Zara's blood run cold. Chittering, clicking, the scrape of claws against metal. "Ah!" Vex'thul's voice returned to its condescending tone. "I believe the human is about to receive additional data regarding our combat assessment protocols. Kril'zon was merely the preliminary evaluation. Now we shall observe how your species performs against multiple opponents simultaneously." The first creature to emerge from the new passages looked like Kril'zon's bigger, meaner cousin. Then came another, and another. Within seconds, Zara was surrounded by a half-dozen aliens, each one larger and more heavily armored than her original opponent. "You cowardly piece of garbage." Zara screamed up at the observation deck. "You can't beat me fair, so you're sending in the whole pack?" "Fair." Vex'thul's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "My dear human, there is nothing fair about survival. If your species wishes to be taken seriously in the galactic community, you must prove you can handle overwhelming odds. Consider this a graduation exam." Zara looked around at the circle of alien warriors closing in on her. Each one was armed with natural weapons that could tear through steel, and they moved with the coordinated precision of a pack that had hunted together before. By any rational calculation, she was about to die in a very messy fashion. Instead of fear, she felt something else entirely. A cold, burning rage that started in her chest and spread outward until her entire body thrummed with lethal intent. These bastards had made one crucial mistake. They thought this was still an experiment. "You want to see how humans handle overwhelming odds?" Zara asked quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the suddenly silent arena. "Let me show you what happened to the last group that tried this approach." She didn't wait for them to make the first move. Zara exploded into motion with a ferocity that caught even the experienced hunters off guard. The metal rod became a blurred destruction as she targeted joints, sensory organs, and nerve clusters with surgical precision. But this wasn't like her fight with Kril'zon. These creatures were ready for her tactics, and they fought back with everything they had. Claws raked across her body armor, leaving deep gouges that would have been fatal if not for the reinforced plating. Mandibles snapped at her throat, missing by inches as she twisted away from their killing strikes. The difference was that Zara had stopped thinking of this as combat. In her mind, this had become something far more primal. This was survival in its purest form, and humans had been surviving impossible odds since long before they'd learned to use tools. She grabbed the first alien's arm and used its own momentum to slam it face first into the arena wall. The impact cracked its exoskeleton and sent it crumpling to the floor. But even as it fell, two more were closing in from her flanks. Zara spun the metal rod in a wide arc that caught both attackers across their compound eyes, temporarily blinding them. Then she dove between their legs, rolled to her feet behind them, and delivered a series of strikes to the base of their skulls that sent them both sprawling. "Impossible," she heard Vex'thul mutter through the intercom. "The human is actually winning against superior numbers and weaponry. How is this occurring?" "Because you never bothered to study us properly," Zara shouted as she dodged another claw swipe and responded with a devastating counterattack. "You see our technology and think you understand what we're capable of, but you never looked at why we developed that technology in the first place." The remaining aliens were beginning to show hesitation, their coordinated attacks becoming more cautious and defensive. Zara could see the doubt creeping into their movements, and she pressed her advantage ruthlessly. "Humans don't fight wars," she continued, using the metal rod to vault over a low-tackle attempt and coming down with her knees on her attacker's back. The crack of breaking chitin echoed through the arena. "We fight extinction events. Every single day of our evolution has been about surviving things that should have killed us." She grabbed another alien by the throat and use it as a shield while the others try to coordinate their attacks. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, predators with better weapons and armor than us. Do you know what we did? We got mean. The alien she was using as a shield tried to break free, but Zara had learned its anatomy during the fight. She knew exactly where to apply pressure to keep it compliant, while she dealt with its packmates. Every species in the galaxy evolved on worlds that were trying to nurture them. Zara snarled as she threw her living shield into two other attackers, sending all three crashing into a heap. Earth spent millions of years trying to murder us, and we survived anyway. Only one alien remained standing, and it was backing away from her with obvious terror. Its compound eyes tracked her every movement, but now they held the same fear she'd seen in prey animals just before they bolted. "Run," Zara said quietly, pointing the metal rod at the creature's chest. "Run back to your instructor and tell him what you learned today. Tell him that humans don't lose because we can't afford to. Tell him that when you corner us, we don't surrender. We multiply the problem." The alien needed no further encouragement. It scrambled toward one of the still-open passages and disappeared into the depths of the facility, its claws scraping frantically against the metal floor in its haste to escape. Zara stood in the center of the arena, surrounded by the groaning forms of defeated aliens. Her body armor was shredded. Her exposed skin was covered in cuts and bruises, and she was bleeding from at least a dozen different wounds. But she was alive, and they weren't. Fascinating. Vex'thul's voice drifted down from the observation deck, though it now carried a note of genuine respect mixed with fear. The human has defeated 6 trained warriors using nothing but primitive weapons and tactics. This data will require significant analysis. Analysis? Zara looked up at the observation window and smiled with blood-stained teeth. "Oh, we're not done with the data collection yet, bug boy. See, you made another mistake. You assumed this was a controlled environment." She began walking toward the wall directly beneath the observation deck, her movements casual but purposeful. The thing about humans is that we're really good at breaking things that aren't supposed to be broken. It's kind of our specialty. "Security protocols are in effect," Vex'thul said, though his voice had lost its confidence. "The human cannot escape the containment area." "Escape?" Zara reached the wall and began examining its surface, looking for structural weak points. "Who said anything about escaping? I'm not going anywhere until we finish this conversation. And by conversation, I mean the part where I tear off your limbs and use them to redecorate this place." She found what she was looking for, a seam in the wall plating where the emergency blast shields connected to the main structure. The metal rod might not have been designed as a crowbar, but it would do the job. "The containment system is rated for beings far stronger than humans," Vex'thul said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "It is impossible for her to breach the barriers." Zara jammed the rod into the seam and began applying leverage. "You know what your real problem is. You studied human technology, human tactics, even human psychology, but you never studied human stubbornness." The wall plating began to buckle under the pressure. Not much, just a slight warping that created a larger gap for her to work with. Zara repositioned the rod and applied more force, her muscles straining against the alien engineering. Humans are the species that looked at the ocean and said, "I think I'll cross that in a wooden box." We're the ones who saw mountains and decided to climb them just because they were there. We invented flight because we were jealous of birds, and we went to the moon because someone told us it was impossible. The seam split open with a screech of tearing metal. Zara immediately began working on the next connection point, her movements methodical and relentless. "Emergency. All security teams to observation. Level 7 immediately." Vex'thul's voice had risen to a panicked shriek. "The human has breached primary containment. And here's the fun part," Zara called out as she continued her systematic destruction of the containment system. "I'm not even angry anymore. This is just me being thorough. Because the thing about humans, we finish what we start." The wall section gave way completely, creating a gap just large enough for a determined human to squeeze through. Zara tossed the metal rod aside and began climbing up the breach, her movement swift and sure despite her injuries. "You wanted to study human combat capabilities?" Her voice echoed to the facility's ventilation system as she disappeared into the walls. Congratulations. You're about to get a masterclass in urban warfare, alien style. Hope you kept good notes, because this is going to be one hell of a final exam. The last thing Vex'thul heard before the intercom went dead was the sound of Zara's laughter echoing through the facility's corridors. It was a laugh of someone who had just remembered that being human meant never accepting defeat, no matter how impossible the odds. And as emergency alarms began blaring throughout the facility, one thought kept running through the alien instructor's mind. Perhaps studying humans from a distance would have been the wiser choice after all, but it was far too late for wisdom now. Class was in session, and Professor Chen was just getting started with her curriculum on human survival tactics. The facility's lights flickered and went out, plunging everything into darkness. In that darkness, something that sounded suspiciously like maniacal laughter echoed through the corridors. The real lesson was about to begin.